with liberty and justice for all. And that is Mrs. Dean, so we will hold up. She's good. We just said the pledge. You're good. Just run the gauntlet. We'll give her just a minute. I will go ahead and do.
Love you. Sorry, I'm late.
No, you're okay.
You here, baby.
Girl. I'm in that time. All right. We will move on to President's remarks. As per usual, please place all cell phones on silent. I also want to say a belated Happy Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a nice, relaxing couple of days and ate as much turkey and pie as you wanted, if that's your thing. You didn't have to cook too much. Yeah. As we get closer to, can you believe it's December 9th already, y'all? Like, who's done with their Christmas shopping? I'm impressed. Okay, not me. Let me just say, I've been sewing, and I said some bad words to my sewing machine today. I'm just saying. Yes, Jackie, the recorder is on. She reminds me because I will forget, and she knows that. I also want to officially say we now know that our election results are official. Mrs. Martin and I will be here for 6 more years. Y'all are still stuck with us. So I'll just congratulate her. And we will move on to, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda of the December 9th regular meeting as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Osowski, seconded by Ms. Miller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our first call to the audience, public participation regarding agenda items. I see no audience that isn't a staff or a candidate for a vacant seat, so I'm going to assume that is a no. Unless y'all just have, staff have desire to speak. Okay. We will move on to our presentations. So our first presentation is actually the interviews of the candidates for the appointment to the vacant trustee position. It was vacated by Mr. McAfee. I will not I'll give you just a quick rundown, and then we'll do them just in the order they are in our board packet. So what we'll do is we'll call you forward. We'll have you take a couple minutes, tell us who you are, introduce yourself, why you want to serve on this board, and then each board member will go just down the table. We'll be given the opportunity to ask 2 questions. And if needed, a follow-up question. And then later in the night, we will have some discussion and hopefully successfully appoint a new board member. So having said that, Megan Johnson, come on up. I know it's scary. I think it's just as hard to go first as it is last. When I was appointed, I went last. And yeah, yes. And then there's a little button to turn your microphone on. So, so just so you know, I'm Evelyn Pridemore. I am the board president. I have served on this board. Will officially be starting my 3rd term, so I'm at about 13 years now, with 6 more to go. And welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna be transparent. I'm nervous, so
that's okay. We've quite a few of us have been in that seat. So
Yeah.
So thank you for having me. My name is Megan Johnson. A little bit about me: I am a limited license master in social work. Both my bachelor's degree and master's degrees are in social work from Eastern Michigan. I have. We have fellow Eagle. Okay,
Dr. Lindsay.
Okay. Go Eagles. So since then, I have worked in various capacities. I worked in Wyandotte Public Schools as a graduation coach, assisting at-risk students in their academics on a daily basis. Then from there, and I went into my master's program, I worked with Monroe ISD for my internship, where I focused on special education students within the preschool GSRP and Head Start program. After that, I moved to Detroit Leadership Academy in Detroit and was there for the last 7 school years, where I worked as a 504 coordinator. I ran and created a social emotional learning curriculum for their students and implemented that into specials classes and taught on a daily basis, along with creating other anti-bullying initiatives for the students that they can participate on and spread kindness throughout the school. Through that, I worked obviously within the special education department. I was case manager over different IEP students, specifically students with emotional impairment and autism. So I have a lot of different experience kind of in more so in the special education department, and being whole child centered. And with that, I put a big emphasis for the school district that I was at on including the families within that and creating a collaborative relationship with the families and creating resources for them to ultimately as a whole grow as a family along with their child. That's what I have for
All right, thank you. Can we just hire her instead of appointing her to the board? Yeah. I'm just like, wow. Okay, so we promise not to be too terribly hard on you, and I will
Okay.
start down at the end of the table. No, Mr. Oseski,
No.
you don't want to go first?
No.
Okay, then I'll go first.
Okay.
And then I'll go to Mr. Oseski. You, look, don't make me come down there. So, I noticed that you work within a charter school.
I did.
And you still work within the charter school?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, that makes my life a little easier. What makes you want to serve Redford Union as a board member?
I would have to say my children. I have a daughter who has graduated from Redford Union Schools and is at Fair State on a full ride scholarship from the early college program. I have a 10th grader and a preschooler who are both also in Redford Union School District.
You got a big gap there.
Yeah.
I understand that. There's an 8-year gap between my middle son and my youngest son.
And actually my youngest is 1, so he'll
Oh,
eventually be a Redford Union, but
Wow.
he's not there yet.
Yeah, wow, bless your heart. You're busy. Okay. What is your understanding of what a school board member's role is?
I'm going to be very transparent, and there has been a lot of people who I worked with previously who's always said that I've been a very large advocate for the students that I work with and for the families that come into our school. And so for me, being on the school board and being a part of making decisions for the community at a macro level is kind of like my next step, right? So I kind of started off small and worked my way up, and for me, I saw the post about it and getting emails, obviously, from the school district and things like that as a parent, and having the social justice background, I wanted to use the skills that I have to bring that to the table.
Thank you. All right. Okay, Mrs. Martin?
What are your thoughts on school discipline?
As far as just as a whole.
Just in general, yeah.
So I've had a lot of practice with restorative practices, and not so much. I came from a school district that didn't fully believe in like suspensions and things like that, but obviously working with the students where they're at and creating those restorative responses, and hopefully from there that will guide them to make better decisions moving forward. As far as making decisions on what disciplinary actions happen for certain students, I was not a part of those conversations. I'm going to be transparent. But I have been in situations with students and families and administrators and having those restorative conversations and practices moving forward.
That's all I have right now.
Okay. Ms. Miller?
I have one. You are one voice, but the board makes decisions. Can you speak to your ability to build consistency when your opinion is in the minority?
Okay. So what I heard, I just want to make sure I heard it right. Being on a board, obviously, there's many voices, so if my voice is of the one, what would my response be to that?
How would you build consensus? Help the
When
board.
your opinion is in the minority.
So I would say that obviously being on a board and being a part of a team and making anything successful, I think that there needs to be collaboration and understanding. Sometimes we may agree or disagree, and that's okay. And that's something that I've worked really hard with, and obviously being as a social worker, not everything ends up the way that we want it, right? But ultimately, knowing that I'm working with a trusted group of people who are making decisions for the good, the greater good as a whole, I would want to have that trust within the fellow board members that I work with.
Okay.
She went to school. Did she answer that already? What did she answer?
Yeah. She said because she has kids in the district. Okay. All right. Ms. Dean?
Okay, reading over your introductory letter is impressive,
Thank you.
and so is your resume.
Thank
I just
you.
want to say that. And also, your background is so near and dear to my heart. I would say that. Working in social work, I also work in social services.
Okay.
And also, your background in special education, I think that's awesome. I wanted to just draw your attention to something you said in your letter about bringing social justice out. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit to the board?
Sure. I think that what I meant when I say the social justice outlook, I feel that sometimes school boards or just school administrators in general, we look at like the macro level, right? And sometimes, and obviously that's for the best decision as the district, but sometimes I think that we need to focus more on like what could we do to be a resource to, whether it be a student or a family or the community as a whole. So what I would hope that having that passion and that heart and bringing it to you guys, and whether it be hard situations that come up, or if we know that there's certain people that are in need as a school board, I don't know, I guess just kind of bringing that open heart and that kindness to the community and to our schools, and not only to the kids but also to the staff members as well. I know as a fellow staff member, being in a school is very difficult, and sometimes how we feel may be overlooked as well. So making sure that we're putting in our own heart and efforts into meeting everybody where they're at. Welcome.
Mr. Bailey?
Hello, Ms. Johnson, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So I want to thank you very much for participating in this process.
Thank you for
As you
having me.
can see, we're not overwhelmed. So I'm willing to say that the few, the proud, the brave are willing to step up.
Thank you.
So there was a question about charter schools at the start here. Would you say that a child is a child, whether it's a charter, they're from charter school, parochial school, or public school?
Could you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
So I think there's divisions that are created as to whether you're charter, parochial, public, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm asking is, in your viewpoint, your philosophy, a child, regardless if they're charter, parochial, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They're still a child, right?
Correct.
And considered the same when
Correct.
we make our decisions.
Correct.
My second question is it time for the second question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, if you don't happen to get this position,
Mhm.
would you still be willing to work with the district?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Osowski?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. And we've all been in your shoes. I think everybody on the board.
My hands are sweating so bad. I'm trying.
You're doing great.
I was an
Yeah.
appointee
Deep breaths.
13 years ago. Mrs. Martin was an appointee about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My question is, what do you think the role of the board is?
I think that ultimately you guys are the decision makers at the highest level. We look at curriculum, budgeting, planning, staffing. I believe that you would be overseeing the superintendent and things like that. So it's managing the district as a whole.
I guess in a nutshell, we manage one employee.
Okay.
We work on setting
Mr. Wick.
policy.
Okay.
So,
He's got 7 bosses.
I mean,
He's-
yeah.
oh, 8, because he's got Jackie.
So
I have one.
I
That's a
have
lot.
9 and
Then I
his
have
wife.
So
See, you got 2
that's where I'm,
daughters. so-
you know, we set policy and we instruct Mr. Witt to the best of his ability to do it. And that's, I just want you to be aware coming in, and it's a learning experience. So that's only,
Thank you for that.
Go ahead.
Just a follow-up question. So do you have the time to commitment to be on the board? We meet twice a month. And so, plus, yeah, sometimes we have specials, meetings. Would you have the time?
I believe that I would. I do have a job, but I'm done by 5 o'clock, and it's not far. It's just 20 minutes from here, and I live in the backyard right here. I also am, very active just in Redford Union as a whole anyway, so I would make it a priority.
Thank you.
Sometimes you get board packets that look like this, by the way.
Okay.
Sometimes they're not as intensive as this. You'll hear a lot of information tonight. Does anybody else have a follow-up? Okay. You're off the hot seat. Hang in there. We do have some discussion. This is a little bit longer of a meeting, but we'll try to move it along.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Richard Hoffman. Come on down. You're the next contestant.
I would have volunteered to go first just to get you off the hook. Good evening.
Good evening. So once again, just tell us a little about yourself and why you want to undertake this crazy position.
I'd be happy to. First of all, I'd like to thank all the board members, as well as the faculty for being here, and all of you for allowing me to be here tonight. A little bit about myself. I've been in Redford Union for over 30 years now. I have 4 children that are grown with families of their own. And my 4 children are probably the most diverse bunch you will ever see. I have an honor student on each end, scholar athlete, letter winner. I got a boy in the middle who went in the front door and out the back. And I have a daughter who dealt with a serious emotional disorder and had a very difficult time staying in school. She would get violently ill, and ultimately she had to withdraw. I think that what a school board does, I do realize what your point was very good. They get the superintendent, and then from then on, they support him or her with whatever endeavors she has. I've been on several boards of different natures, including the parish council at Our Lady of Loretto here in Redford for many years, serving as president for 2 terms. I sat on a board for the World Taekwondo Federation for many years when I was teaching and instructing. And I think that my background, being very diverse as it is, and would lend itself to, I think I would be an asset to this board, and I think I could contribute a lot. And I'm very organized. I attended Walsh College, my undergrad's at Walsh, business administration, major in accounting. I went on to try to get my master's in education and counseling, but work kind of saw it another way, and they decided they wanted me to teach at the Ford facility. So I spent my time there developing, implementing, and designing all the programs and training for the Ford production system, and then administering that both to the employees as well as what we call train the trainer, because we can't be at every plant all the time. That kind of put me on a 24/7 schedule, which made it very difficult to do any shadowing or student teaching. So I opted at that time that I would put the master's on hold and, you know, do my best with what I could at work with teaching adults.
But you're still young enough to get that master's. You can.
I'm seriously thinking about going back. I'm close. I got close. Right. And I
Okay.
do have good friends who are teachers that I don't think would have any problem letting me spend some time with them.
Yeah.
But thank you.
And you know, we make the path to your certificates much easier in the state of Michigan than it used to be. There's a wonderful part. All right, I will go down. I will start with Mrs. Martin.
Same question for me. What are your just thoughts on schools discipline?
Discipline.
Yes.
Well, coming from a martial arts background, you can almost guess what my view on discipline is. I was very strict with my students. I believe that in order for students, number one, to feel safe, to feel nurtured, and know that they are in a safe learning environment, there has to be a level of discipline equal to, for example, the infraction. So I do believe that there are going to be cases where a slap on the wrist is not going to be suitable, and suspensions or, unfortunately, expulsion for severe cases is going to be necessary at times. I don't relish the thought of ever doing that to a child, but, you know, like I said, safety first. You're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
What traits would you look for in a superintendent?
What traits would I look for in a superintendent? I would look for someone who is organized, dedicated, has a track record of being successful in an education environment, someone who is equally skilled and gifted at communication as they are at administration.
All right.
Okay, sounds good.
I liked your other question. Can I answer that one?
Yeah.
If you want to.
The question
Your
about
question
one
was
voice
about
and
being in the
building.
minority.
Oh, yeah,
If your
building
view-
consensus. That'll just be my question.
Okay, good.
Because I was waiting for somebody to ask it.
Okay. It's very
I'll just steal
difficult.
I'll just steal her question.
It's very difficult to have a minority opinion, and with this many individuals on a board, there's going to come a time when there are going to be one or two people that are in that minority opinion. I can certainly accept the opinion of the majority. However, I will say that if I feel strongly enough about something, I am going to fight. I'm going to give my reasons for the way I feel. I'm going to try to provide some sort of evidence that this is why I feel that way. And in the end, though, I certainly would accept a majority rule.
Thank you. I always tell
Thank you.
people to vote their conscience and their
Absolutely,
heart,
I
and that
can.
may mean that they don't agree. For years, I was one of two votes against layoffs every year when we were in deficit. My conscience
Right.
didn't allow me to do it. And so for many, many years, my first probably 6 years on the board, I was like, nope, nope, nope. And because I needed to go home and sleep at night.
Certainly respect that.
Mrs. Dean. Okay, we'll come back. Mr. Bailey.
Mr. Hoffman, thank you
Yes.
very much for participating.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate you stepping forward to do this.
Thank you.
Also, I'll ask the same question I asked Ms. Johnson. If you don't make this position at this point in time, would you still be willing to work with the district?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Osowski.
I'll follow up with the same question. What do you view as your role on the board?
I'm sorry?
What do you picture yourself as a role on the board? What do you think we do?
I think that my role on the board would be to help, first of all, support the superintendent, work with the superintendent, and strive for student success. I think that's why we're here, and that's why all of you are here, because we're striving to make our students as successful as they can be and prepare them for all the challenges and the difficulties, because it's not an easy world we live in now. And when they leave here, like I said, I had the one daughter, who the oldest, who was she didn't even have to open a book, and this child would get straight A's. My youngest had to study for hours to get straight A's. So when they get out in the world, I had one that was like, oh, it's supposed to be easy, isn't it? And one who went on to graduate with honors from, I'm very proud, I can't have to throw that in there, from
Yeah,
Oakland University.
Absolutely.
She was a marketing and human resources major, and she actually chose to go work for nonprofits, believe it or not. Lower pay, but for her, the reward is much higher. So,
Mrs. Dean? Okay, anybody have a follow-up? I'll reiterate, we explained about the amount of time involved.
absolutely, understand.
And the level, sometimes the pages of reading. And so just, it's not a couple hours on a Monday night. There's some commitment to it.
Sure.
All right, thank you so very much.
You're
You guys
very welcome. Thank
always
you,
make
everyone.
this really hard on us.
Thank you.
Okay, now you get to hear the fun stuff. Thankfully, we only have to do this once a year. Financial audit, Dan Merritt, come on down.
Not that we don't like having you.
We love you, Dan, but let's
I'm
face
always very
it.
popular before the audit and after the audit, and rarely during the audit. So.
Tough job, right?
Well, good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name's Dan Merritt. I'm here from Raymond Robson. We're the district's financial auditors, and this is our second year as the district's financial auditors. In front of you, you should have three things. You should have the audit presentation, which is what I'll be going through today. You should have a letter from us to management. That's called the audit letter, or the SAS 114 letter, Statements and Auditing Standards 114. And you also should have a complete bound copy of this year's financial statements, which include the single audit or grant report.
Which we are all just dying to read.
I know, all 112 pages of it, or
Yes.
something fantastic like that. If you've worked in commercial accounting, usually your audit reports are 20 pages, maybe. School districts and other governmental organizations get even more transparency, which is great. So we'll primarily be focused on the presentation today. I may reference things that are happening in the reports. If you want to look at more things in detail in any of the reports, I'm happy to do that while we're here. Can we go to the next slide? Great. Brief agenda for the presentation. I'm going to talk about who's on the audit team. I'm going to talk about our required board communications. I'm going to briefly discuss financial results for the district. Spend 5 seconds talking about upcoming accounting pronouncements, which is also called More Work for Mike's team. And then at the end, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. So people on your team, your audit is overseen by Nate Balderman. He's my boss. He's been doing this for 27, 28 years, and his dad used to be head of local audit finance for the state of Michigan. He signs all of our work and makes sure that everything is correct and appropriate. Myself, Jen Mohares, and Brendan Burns all are the audit team that actually works with Mike on the ground. So, board communications, there are a couple of things we're required to talk to you guys about every year. First and most importantly, we gave an unmodified opinion on the June 30th, 2024 financial statements. That's also called a clean opinion in the audit business. And this is what you want most of all from us. You need to have a clean opinion before the beginning of November so that you can continue to receive your state aid. It means that we think that these financial statements that you have in front of you are fairly presented, can be used to make good decisions, and are materially correct in all respects. So this is This is the most important thing that we do for you guys, and happy to report that yet again this year, you received a clean or unmodified opinion on your financial statements in time to continue to receive regular state aid payments. So that's point number one. Point number two, every year the district has to report under GASB standards, Governmental Accounting Standards Board pronouncements. This year they issued a new pronouncement. It was called GASB 100. It talked about if you changed things happening within the district or its funds, or had to restate beginning fund balance or net position for correction of an error, how would that have to be done? So I only point that out to note that it was implemented this year. I'll point to the last sentence. This had no impact on the district's financial statements for 2024. It might in the future. If you change funds, if you change major funds, we might be talking about, oh, what is this weird adjustment at the bottom of my financial statements? We would now call that a GASB 100 adjustment. But for this year, nothing to worry about, nothing to report. Bullet point number 3, as part of our engagement as the district's auditors, we're required to assess whether accounting estimates completed by management are reasonable. Accounting requires a lot of estimates. When you're thinking about capital assets, you have to estimate how much of that asset is used every year. You have to record compensated absences on your books, which is an estimate of how much paid time off the district has accumulated. And if we ended business suddenly on June 30th, what would you have to pay out to your employees on that estimate? Also, the pension and OPEB amounts that are in the financial statements include a number of estimates. Those estimates are not under the district's control because you're part of the statewide system. The state controls what estimates are made, but those estimates have a significant impact on you as the local district. We assessed all of those estimates, deemed them reasonable, didn't have any issues. Number 4, we're required to report it to the board if we had any difficulties dealing with management, if there were questions that we asked that weren't answered, support that we wanted that wasn't provided. Of course, that was not the case. Anything that we asked management was provided to us and was appropriately supported. Number 5, and I will talk about these last 2 bullets in detail on the next slide, so don't be too concerned with this particular part right this second. We noted some material misstatements during our audit. We'll talk about those and the correction of those. We also had a SOAP, which is called a Schedule of Adjustments Passed. Some auditors call this a PAGI. It's basically things that we noted that weren't correct, that we said didn't have to be corrected this year. We let Mike correct them in fiscal 25 because they weren't significant or material. It doesn't mean they weren't corrected, just meant that we didn't force him to do it right away because the most important thing is to get the report done, materially correct, and issued on time. Finally, there were a couple of deficiencies, material weaknesses, and some management letter comments that were noted as part of the financial statement audit. Again, I will walk through those one by one in case anyone has questions or concerns about those. So the next slide is the list of, these are all the financial statement, either findings or recommendations. I will only talk specifically about the financial statement findings unless you want me to walk through each recommendation. Recommendations for management are things that we do regularly as part of doing an audit. So I usually don't talk through every single one in front of the board, but if you have questions about any particular one, I'm happy to answer those. All of the recommendations, if you wanted more detail than I'm going to talk about here right now, are in the audit letter in great detail. So number 1, timely year-end close and material adjustments. There was basically one large adjustment that had to be made after we were provided initial information. Mike has a rather difficult job, and his staff do as well, when it comes to especially construction billings, because construction billings sometimes come in, well, a little bit late in the game. District financial staff aren't necessarily in control of when they're going to get billed for something. But if it was for the previous fiscal year, it has to be booked in the previous fiscal year. There was one item that we identified and helped Mike record properly back into, I shouldn't be calling you out specifically, Mike, but helped finance record properly into the correct fiscal year. We have to report on that when we identify an adjustment. So that is included in the financial statements. They're reported correctly, but we do have to let you know when we identify or help identify a large adjustment. It's rarely just us. It's usually both us and finance in conjunction, figuring out that there's something that needs to be corrected. Number 2, we continue to report on budgetary controls. There have been comments in the district's financials on budgetary controls for the last 3 or 4 years. And the comment for this year specifically relates to the board-approved budget being properly translated into the accounting system. We didn't notice that there were any significant, like huge issues this year, but we continue to report on that year over year until it's resolved. So we won't call it fully resolved until everything's been fixed. If you looked at the statements from 2 or 3 years ago, you would notice, and you read through the detail of that finding, you would notice there were a lot more issues with respect to budget than there were in the 2024 financial statements. So our only remaining comment is we need to be careful about translating that information from the board-approved budget into the actual financial reporting system so that when POs are being approved, everything stays within approved budget amounts. So that was the comment for this year. Any questions or anyone want clarification before I keep?
So,
Yes.
would you say that that budgetary control and the reporting, a teaching moment and a lack of experience issue? Or, I mean, how many years have we if we're continuing to have these issues, how do we fix that? So that next year, when you're setting before us, you don't have to tell us the same thing.
Mike, do you want to take that one, and then I'll be happy to comment. I don't want to suggest things on your behalf.
This year seems to be something different fund. As we continue to work through this, the issue this year was translating the high-level board presentation into the several thousand line items of the actual individual account breakdown. There's still, we should still tie that back, and we thought we did, but it did not tie it. So it's getting it from the high level down to the micro level. And the micro level, as Dan said, the micro level is important because that's what we use on a day-to-day basis. So.
I will say, again, I don't want to speak for Mike, but I know Mike comes from commercial accounting, and this is governmental accounting, and these things are different. And I know that as we provided comments about the budget, Mike has continued to try to clean those up. It's now, the board-approved budget is now correctly presented at the functional level instead of the activity level. And I trust that Mike will continue working on our recommendations and improving things. I will say that check should be happening before we identify it and find it. Is the finance department should be taking the board-approved budget, pulling the detail that they what often happens is finance uploads detail into the system based on what they provided to the board, but then doesn't go back and check, did the system properly take all of the data that we put into it? And does it now add up and tie back to what we showed the board? And that was basically the error, was that there were a few small things in there that did not tie back when you re-download the information out of the system.
Gotcha. All right.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to single audit. Ever since 1984, governments now get one audit of federal awards. You used to get a whole bunch of them, but now you just get one every year, which is nice. So Mike doesn't get audited by the Department of Education and the Department of Transportation and anybody else happening to give the school district a federal award. You just get one single audit. We're required as the auditors to pick major programs, and we audit those programs more closely than we audit everything else. That's how a single audit standards work. This year, we audited ESSER again, hopefully for the very last time.
Gotta get it spent.
Had no issues with the district's spend of resources. We continue to note that the district needs to put into place more comprehensive grant policies as required under uniform guidance. I believe this year I gave Mike a version of the one that we worked on with the MSBO. So we're happy to provide assistance, help with that recommendation. I would consider that closer to a management letter comment than an actual finding. It's not an issue with how the district spent grant resources. It's not an issue with allocation of funding. It's just these policies are required, need to start having them, use a template, put them into place, make sure that you are, it provides clarity for if there's ever staff turnover in the finance department for how these things should continue to be handled. So. All right, so that brings us to the end of the audit results. Now we're going to talk, can we go back one? We'll talk just really briefly, very, very high level about financial results as opposed to audit results. So the audit is what we thought about how the audit went. This is talking about where did the district end up at the end of the year. You can see there are three major funds for the district: the general fund, the special education fund, and the capital projects fund. You'll notice that the special education fund breaks even every year. It breaks even because the general fund subsidizes it every single year. So it generally falls slightly short, and then the general fund subsidizes special education fund back to zero, so there isn't a deficit. And capital projects, you see there is a big negative number of net income at the bottom of that fund. Why is that? That's because that's how capital projects for governments work. You get a big chunk of money, and then you spend it down until zero, and then you get it back in capital assets. So you trade all that fund balance, that cash, for capital assets. So I just addressed those two briefly. And non-major funds, that's your student activities fund, that's your food service fund. Those all broke even plus a little bit. So the activity in those funds was fairly normal, plus you added a little bit to fund balance. Finally, maybe most importantly, general fund balance. You added $2 million to general fund balance. What is fund balance? I like to think about this as basically your savings account plus that money that your employer owes you for that travel expense that hasn't yet been reimbursed. So like there's some things that other people owe you, plus less anything that you owe other people. So if we're still thinking about your savings account as a metaphor for this, that's your credit card bill. So it's your checking account balance plus what your employer owed you less your credit card that you have to pay back. That's your fund balance. You added about $2 million to fund balance this year, which is good. We always like to add to fund balance and not take away. That's good. But in context, how good is it? Let's look at the next slide. This is this is a trend. This is sort of your trend lines of how has the general fund performed over the last 4 years. You can see that in 3 of the last 4 years, you've added to fund balance. In 2023, you overspent fund balance slightly because you were investing in some capital projects and other one-time things. So overall, I think anytime you dip into fund balance, you hope that the next year you'll go back to like regular activity. So this is good. You want to see you start to add to fund balance again the next year. One other piece of context is the next slide, which talks about coverage ratio. Coverage ratio is basically, if the school district stopped receiving any money today, how many more months could you go just based on what you have in savings? GFOA recommends about 2 months. That's the Government Finance Officers Association, about 2 months. So you can see in 21, you were almost up to 3 months. And then in 23, you dipped down to about a month and a half. In 24, you're getting back up closer to 2 months. So that's what we want to see. You want to see you get back up to that 2 months number. That's roughly where we hope you should be. Let's flip to the next slide. You are above that 10 to 15% minimum range that we like to see. So there's no danger territory happening right now. But if you were to slip below that 10 to 15%, that's when you start getting into sort of being forced into borrowing, like state aid note borrowing, because you don't have enough cash flow to cover those 2 months where you are without state aid. Remember, you don't get state aid in September and October. You don't get it until November. So if you don't have at least 2 months of fund balance, you kind of risk being into a situation where you have to start to borrow regularly to keep up cash flow. So we want to see that fund balance continue to grow a little bit more over the next few years. Next slide. General obligation bonds, the district has about $54.5 million in general obligation bonds outstanding and made all regular payments. You'll continue to make regular payments. I was just at South Redford's board meeting. I think their bonded debt is about $59 million. So this isn't an unusual range of bonded debt. This is just, we've been doing a lot of school district improvements, so we have debt to pay back on those improvements. You're making those regular payments, not an issue. And then we'll talk just briefly about upcoming funding changes in the state of Michigan. In 2024, there was a healthy per pupil foundation increase, same in 23, same in 22. In 25, they're not giving you a foundation allowance increase. I'm sure you all already know this after the governor's budget was released in July. But I just want to point out sort of how this changes things for most school districts. Basically, they're changing the lever from revenue to the expense side of the house. So instead of giving you more revenue, they're saying you're going to pay less for retirees. The state's
they say.
post-employment, sorry?
Temporarily.
Temporarily.
Less.
The state's post-employment benefits, which is like healthcare for retirees, is almost fully funded now. Or they say it's fully funded, but that's kind of an estimate too. So they're pulling back the lever on how much does each district have to pay in for retirees on post-employment health benefits. So this is good. So instead of giving you more revenue, they've said, well, we're just going to back off how much you have to pay. That's going to affect every school district slightly differently, because instead of being based on per pupil, it's going to be based on how many retirees do you have that have significant retiree health payments. If you have more teachers who are on the long end of their career, you're going to get a bigger discount. If you have lots of newer teachers, you can get a smaller discount. So it's going to affect everyone differently. On the next slide,
Can I just add
go
an
ahead.
editorial real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
The only reason that fund is healthy to allow them to do this, by the way, is because we, as districts and employees on an individual basis, have overpaid into the system.
More
I'll
than-
say that, you don't have to.
Yes, I would
I
say
mean,
that.
that's what I hear from MASB too.
So basically, all I'm saying is this revenue relief is based on our own
Money.
doing.
Correct. You've paid over the years, and now you're reaping the benefit of paying. It's like if you were an individual who had paid off their retirement fund, were ready to retire, no longer had to make those contributions in, you'd free up capital to do other things. So absolutely, the district has made a significant investment, whether it was their choice or not, into the state's post-employment benefit system. The state does think that the pension side of the house will be fully funded by, I believe, the year is 2038. Public universities are out in 2037, and they estimate that K through 12s will be out in 2038. So sometime in the next 14 years, hopefully we'll all get to stop paying quite as much in taxes, and then the school district contributing quite as much to the pension fund as well. So we're a ways away from that, but that's what they expect. The governor's office believes that this is going to result in approximately a $400 per pupil increase. Again, that's just like taking the entire system, averaging it across pupils. That's not the actual impact that you for sure will see. That's just an average for everybody in the state system. And then one probably last very important thing to say about funding for the district. The district received and expended the last $7.6 million of its ESSER allocation this year. And why it's important to bring that up is that there won't be any future funding from COVID-related grants. That includes this current fiscal year we're in right now. That's especially important when you consider, on a previous slide, we said the school district added $2 million to fund balance. In a world without the ESSER grant, you chew up $5 million of fund balance instead of adding $2 million of fund balance. When you're thinking about the budget for this year, for next year, going forward, it's going to be very important to be careful with the expenditure dial of how much are we paying out in salaries, benefits, transportation, any expenditure line item for the district. You aren't going to have as much money coming in to cover those expenses from COVID grants any longer. It's the first time since 21 we really haven't had any COVID grant funding. So one thing to be very cognizant of and careful of as we want to continue adding to fund balance in future years.
So,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, so like what other areas, how can we add to the fund balance with the ESSER dollars being gone?
I'll probably defer to Jason and Mike on that question. I can talk big picture about things that school districts can do, but as far as your specific district, I'd have to defer to Mike and Jason on that.
The important thing
The important thing with the ESSER funding, as the state told us, is not to commit to long-term projects with those funds, because it was a short-term funding, right? And so for the vast majority of our use, it was one-time use or a short period of time use. So there is some that we've committed to see. There was some longer-term commitments out of that, but it's not, in the grand scheme of the overall district, it's not a material or a large commitment out of that. So I think if there were 4 people, a group of 4 people that we were paying out of that. So 4 people out of 300 out of the entire district. So we did not make any significant long-term commitments using those funds.
So those 4 people, will they still be able to be here?
I mean, the bottom line is, there may come a point where we have to, and this would be in the budget development stage for next year, or future years, we may have to look at certain positions, and the long-time viability of being able to have certain positions. But I think what actually happens in reality, and part of this is just the current market, is there are sometimes alternative sources to fund some of those positions. So for example, take some of our SEL-related positions that we've been able to add. Whenever possible, we've sought other funds in order to offset the expense of those positions, whereas before we might have been covering those positions with ESSER funds. In addition, quite honestly, what happens is you start off the budget year budgeting a certain amount of positions, and inevitably, especially in this job market, you have a significant amount of employee turnover. Now, we take steps to try to reduce that, but the fact is, we have positions that for a variety of reasons may go unfilled at some point during the school year. And so, in some respects, you hope that the costs you're avoiding for those positions for that period of time might allow you to continue to fund some other positions that potentially you might not be able to maintain otherwise. Not that you want to see positions go unfilled, but because it creates a lot of other issues at times. But that give and take can help your overall budget on an annual basis. But yeah, there are conversations that Mike and I have already had about just other ways to tighten things up. And we have used some district funds the last few years while we've had people on site doing construction projects and those things, to also do some owner projects and things like that, since we had construction already underway. Potentially we had people we were comfortable with doing the additional work and those type of things. So essentially, some of those projects, now that they're complete, you won't have to pull funds for that. And we've also pursued a few other sources of revenue. So it's just through a combination of things. But I can tell you, we're looking on an annual basis at all our different positions. And one of the reasons why we wanted to put in some different positions when we had those ESSER funds available was to meet the students' needs, obviously. But then we were upfront with a lot of those individuals in those positions that these positions might not be able to be sustained over time. But at the same time, we also wanted to fairly assess the value of those type of positions. And if the return on our investment is there, we might have to get creative with different things. So we run, while you might not hear this often, we do run pretty lean still from an administrative standpoint. And whenever there is any vacant position, we do reevaluate things before. We don't just turn around and let the fact that a position is vacant mean that we post it the next day to fill it. We do, as an administrative team, reevaluate the need for certain positions within the district, and whether there might be some other ways when a position is vacant to still get some of those responsibilities done. So
And this
It's
is,
a combination of things.
this is a wise response too, because some of the other districts that you've seen in the news over the last 2 years going into budget deficits have in large part because they've simply refilled positions immediately after funding them with either ESSER dollars or other replacement funding that went away. And they haven't thought about this carefully as the operations were ongoing, and then all of a sudden they're in a structural situation where they have to lay people off, and that's never fun.
So one of the big requirements of the ESSER 3 grant was that 20% of the grant had to be spent on supplemental activities, which means things you weren't doing before, and the SEL team was a huge part of that 20%. The other 80%, once you hit your 20%, the other 80% could, as they say, supplant or cover costs that you're already incurring or have incurred in the past. So that was a big part of why we did what we did with the SEL team and the ESSER 3 grant.
I'll just give you one quick example of like something that's ongoing right now, for example, is we have a alternative funding source that through Kim's efforts and the efforts of some others on the team, we're pursuing right now for the funding of summer school programming. And that's through a combination of the Balmer Group and United Way and a couple other organizations out there, where historically we've had to use some other fund sources for that summer school programming. There's a good chance that we're going to get funds through that effort to cover summer school, at least for rising first graders through rising ninth graders. So we're always looking for those opportunities that are out there when they present themselves.
Thank you.
My very last slide and most boring slide is about upcoming accounting pronouncements. I only bring this up because I want to highlight all of the very hard work that Mike and his team do to get the audit done. We're up to actually 104 Governmental Accounting Standards Board pronouncements that have to be implemented and properly accounted for, and next year GASB 101 is effective, so Mike and his team will have to work with us on making sure that that's properly accounted for. We do not expect this to have any operational or fund level impact for the district, so I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail, just to say thank you, Mike, for working all the way down to the deadline to make sure that the audit got issued on time and that we were able to complete our work. And with that, I'm happy to take any other questions that the board might have.
I think we're good.
All right. Madam Chairman, would you like me to stick around until the approval of the financial reports, or are you satisfied at this point?
Yes, because we do, we do have an opportunity for questions there, and
Okay.
sometimes something pops into our head between now and the time we approve that. So,
Sounds good.
Yes, please. All right, we will move on to student representative communications. Ms. Jesuit.
Hi guys.
Hi.
So December 7th, or like last Saturday, the Hope Squad had the opportunity to go to Northville for a mental health conference. There they learned about factors that can help, that will decrease someone's mental health, but also discussed about how we can improve mental health at our schools. Tomorrow we have a magician coming to our school to perform for the junior high, high school, and Hope Squad. Thursday, 3 of our Hope Squad members will go to Dearborn Country Club as guest speakers, talking about the importance of mental health. Student Council this week has started selling candygrams for the upcoming holiday. They have an upcoming blood drive next Tuesday, December 17th. Our upcoming schedule for our basketball games is the 10th of December and the 17th for the varsity boys, and the varsity girls has home games on the 13th and 19th. Finally, National Honor Society had their induction ceremony last week, welcoming the 2024 and 2025 members, and they also started a toy drive around the school for Toys for Tots. Is there any questions? Good job. Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, Superintendent Communications, Mr. Witt.
All right. December 2024 Staff Members of the Month. There was not a recount, but Keeler Administration, yours truly, gets the good parking spot, which in our stone lot happens to be like right where the largest puddle in the whole
I think
parking lot
maybe
is
we
in.
need to move the.
So like today, it was pretty bad.
So next month it needs.
When there's snow, it's not bad, but the rain today, wow. Now I know why Jackie didn't park there last month. Beach Elementary School, we had Dina Chapman, Dean of Students. Hilbert Elementary School, Allison Hubert, Social Emotional Learning Specialist. At the junior high school, we had Caitlin Lupro, Special Education Teacher. At the high school, we have Lynn Adolfo, SEL Specialist there. At Keeler, we have Jason Lauterbach, Physical Education Teacher, which I think at Day Treatment, they're really excited that they have an actual physical education teacher, because while we've had someone in that role, it hasn't been a certified PE teacher for a while. And as you might expect, I think the students there benefit from having that opportunity to get that restless energy out. Sometimes they just do that in the hallways, but we encourage it in the gymnasium instead. So it's a more healthy environment for that. And then also for McGowan School, we have Chris Abston, our DHH technician. So kudos to all those winners for December. Next up, and this information will be posted online along with the calendar of events that follows, but our 2024-2025 December board brag book. We want to thank St. Edith Knights of Columbus for generously donating 100 coats for the students at Beach Elementary School. And then I think it's good to highlight there that also in addition to those coats that were donated, we also did have additional coats from the FedEx Cares program at Hilbert. So we were able to help as many students as needed one at Beach Elementary have a warm coat for this winter. And even some of the larger sizes of the coats we had through the FedEx Cares program, we were able to distribute to students at Veritas. So excellent job there, and thank you for the Knights of Columbus for their generous donation. At Hilbert Elementary, the PBIS team led by Allison Hubert has been working along with the PBIS team there to create 3 different awards, one for grades 3 through 6 and one for grades K through 2 in each category. So they have their Golden Boot Award for exceptional behavior in the hallways, the Golden Spatula Award for outstanding behavior at lunch, and the Golden Football Award for positive behavior at recess. Then they also have the Golden Apple and Shining Star Awards as well. So kudos to the whole PBIS team there coming up with those awards, and there's some pictures there of the different award winners. Some individual and then some as classrooms pictured there. There's the Golden Boot, I see it. It's outstanding.
I love the little kids.
Next up at the junior high school, we want to thank our, we've had some transition from year to year in our school resource officer position that we partner with Redford Township Police Department to have. And I want to acknowledge Officer Hall here, who's being recognized by the junior high school. I can tell you, and we love all our school resource officers that we've had, and fortunate to have a school resource officer because they're not always available. But I've heard very excellent comments from Officer Hall since he joined us for this school year. So it's great to see that he's being highlighted by the junior high school for helping with an assembly during anti-bullying week, along with the school resource officer from the school to the south. And we just thank them for their efforts. There's some pictures there as well from the junior high school. We've also had a push at the junior high school to look at more opportunities for project-based learning, experiential learning, some hands-on stuff. So we do want to recognize at the junior high, Mr. Schlicker, ninth grade biology, and his efforts to allow students to use candy to make their own DNA models. And of course, they were able to eat them after they were
Beautiful.
reviewed.
I love it.
And also, Mrs. Kuka, our eighth grade ELA teacher, for revolutionizing her classroom and moving towards some center-based learning approaches in ELA. It's interesting, you talk about that center-based approach. It's something that you see oftentimes at the elementary level in those classrooms, but there's a lot to be gained from those center-based approaches. It also allows for some more intensive small group time that I know our students benefit from that are in need of some interventions. So it's great to see that that's going on, and it appears that not only Mrs. Kuka, but other teachers are starting to work towards some of that approach as well within their classrooms, probably mixing in with some of what they've maybe done more so traditionally. So we appreciate our staff for taking those steps to try to change things up to better meet the needs of our students when needed. Also at the junior high school, we want to thank our school psychologist, Andrea Lamb, and her husband for donating 16 turkeys that were given away to families for Thanksgiving. So thank you to Miss Lamb and her husband. At the high school, we had 214 students who not only received an official eye exam after the initial general pre-screening of students, but those same 214 students are now going to be very soon receiving their new free pair of glasses. Oh, they've already arrived. They had glasses handout day. So again, at Note, we've talked about the Vision to Learn program and that partnership before, so that's outstanding that now here in the month of December, those students have received a new pair of glasses at no cost to our families. And I do have an update that next up, I think is the junior high school, is going to be doing their pre-screening process next week. And then once that pre-screening has been done, they will follow the similar mold to what was done at the high school, on the high school side of our secondary campus. And those students who are also, any student that needs it, will also receive that free pair of glasses. And then through a combination of Vision to Learn in Wayne County Health Department, they'll be doing that same thing at both Beach and Hilbert. Also at Redford Union High School, Ms. Thomas's Academic Achievers Program, they had a program that we wanted to highlight where the students were given a chance to have a real-life experience with budgeting skills. So that's highlighted there, along with their trip to, it looks like, the dollar store to spend their money and stretch their dollar as far as possible. Also at the high school, we want to recognize the work of the Hope Squad. This has been an outstanding program launched. It's been highlighted throughout the fall, but we just want to thank all those students in the month of November. They did celebrate with the Thanksgiving meal, and obviously we've highlighted the great efforts of the student leaders involved in that peer-to-peer program as they tackle mental health issues. And I'm excited that they're gonna have the opportunity, the students that are coming out, to showcase and highlight that to districts around the Tri-County area later this week, as Alicia mentioned in her comments. Next up, Keeler Day Treatment. They also had a shopping spree and lunch. We want to thank the partners, the Alhambra and Leo's Coney Island, for their involvement there. And also, there's an upcoming, on December 13th, Keeler ADT has a PBIS reward trip, and they'll be partnering there with Mayflower Lane and also Leo's Coney Island again. And you know what? We have all kinds of therapy dogs. We've highlighted our therapy dogs, but I'm just going to say, as cute as George is and the other dogs that we have, Pixie might be the cutest therapy dog ever. This is the first I saw the pictures, and I'm getting a glare from Robin over there, but come on. Pixie?
She's like, don't be talking smack about George.
So there's a photo there. And then last but not least, we also wanted to highlight Veritas program that's right here in this wing of this building here at McGowan. And they hosted a Thanksgiving breakfast, their annual breakfast. So thank you to Mr. Marable, Mrs. McDonald, and Mrs. Perry for all their hard work in putting together another wonderful breakfast. And we certainly want to wish you all the joys of the season, a Merry Christmas, and happiness throughout the remainder of December as we roll into the month of January. Next up, the calendar of events you have in front of you that will be posted online, and there's all kinds of good stuff posted in there. So we will get that posted as well, and you all have copies of that. And I'm looking forward tomorrow to that assembly. I've gotten to see that magician in a smaller setting, and I found out that he did assemblies that not only that incorporated his magic into mental health awareness. So I look forward to both the junior high students and the high school students experiencing that tomorrow.
It's interesting. Actually, I saw that magician. I work for a community mental health agency, and I was thinking about him, and I was like, I need to get his information to the superintendent to see if he can come out. And to see that, because I actually talked to him, I was like, hey, you go to Redford? And so to see that you guys, you know what I'm saying, happen to connect with, it's a great, he's good.
Yeah, he's impressive for sure.
What time is it?
I think his goal tomorrow is to make Mr. Taylor disappear, so we'll see if that happens.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Bailey?
What time is that?
There's a presentation at 9:40 for the junior high school, and then at noon for the high school.
Thank you.
All right.
That's it.
All right. We will move on. Communications received by the board secretary, Mrs. Martin.
I have none.
Okay. Chief Financial Officer's Communications, Mr. Beltink.
I would like to spin you guys through the financial statements real quick. There's not, I think we did a pretty good job budgeting at the end of the year. There's not a lot of differences. Some ones I'd like to point out in the general fund. So the first line, local sources. Those are predominantly property taxes, cell tower rental, building rental, things like that. So the main difference between the final budget and the actual budget was caused by Dan making the,
Dan, shame on you.
So we did those darn Gatsby statements. Yes, some darn Gatsby statements. So we took a lump sum payment on the cell tower, as you guys all remember. It was a 4-year agreement, so we have to amortize the revenue. We get the cash, so we have the cash, but we have to recognize the revenue over those 4 years. So, we had put the whole revenue in there, and that came out. And then the remaining balance, we were off slightly on some of the property tax collection amounts on that. So, we estimated a little bit higher collection rate than actually came through. So, everything else on the revenue side was pretty solid there. If you look at the expenses, on the instruction and support services, so instruction are your classroom, people in the classrooms, your teachers, your EAs, your direct supports, and then the support services are your speech, your counselors, and all the, obviously, like I said, support services outside the classroom. The main drivers on this there is on the calculation for the UAL, or the retirement benefits. We're working on a better model to get those a little bit more accurate. Should be a little easier now that they've simplified it a little bit this year and can drop the rates to try to calculate those. So that was a driving factor for the retirement rates on the instruction support services. So that's driving that. You want to switch over to the center program. On the center program, I got clarification, so from RISA on state sources. So for the center-based programs, that flows through the general fund, and we have to allocate from the general fund to the center-based program. That's the foundation amount. We had clarification on from RISA, from the business office in RISA, on how to calculate that. So we had overestimated in the final budget what that was, and then I got clarification during the summer from Drew on that. And that's the driving factor. It's not that we collected less or anything like that. It was just the actual calculation based on student headcount. And then if you look at the expense side, in total, the expenses came up pretty close. It was just a mix between instruction and support services where they actually fell. There's a variance. We were underspent on instruction, overspent on support services. Just where we allocated those people initially in the budget versus where they actually came out. So in total, if you look at the expenditures, you're looking at 10.3 versus about 10.45. So pretty darn close in the grand scheme of things. Let's skip debt. Debt is, there's really no debt, there's no trick to debt. That's all schedule driven. There's no variances there. And if you look at food service, the driving factors. So local sources came out way higher. So this for 23-24, a lot of that is food service that we provided to Wayne Metro and McGowan. In the previous year or two, they had done their own food service because they were at Beck. But since they're in McGowan now, that's our kitchen, and we have to provide their meals to them. So that wasn't accounted for in the budget. That drove most of that variance. And going forward, we should see that same level of revenue going forward. And then the support services there, that's basically, that's all food driven for them. I mean, there's some salaries and benefits in there, but the variance is driven by commodity usage and then prices, commodity prices. So that is my analysis for those three funds in a nutshell. Again, I think I was pretty happy with the models that we used this year. I think we came up pretty good. Hopefully we can continue that going forward. Other thing that was on our list here, annual tax resolution that was prepared. A lot of that was prepared by Ms. Tammy. We're going to ask you guys to vote on that later today. Gary, that was in the board package, right?
Yeah, it is. volunteer? She's like, no.
We only get to see you once a year.
We do this every year.
I just changed the date.
I mean,
So, yeah,
it's the same thing every year.
It's an annual requirement that we get for approval on the
Collecting taxes.
Way to go, Terry.
Required to file it.
January's coming up, employee of the month, don't worry about
It's such a job to let the cat out of that.
We all know how good she is.
So, it's our annual requirement to sign up to that and get board approval before we can move forward. So. Any questions on the summary, the fund summaries? All right, that's all I have today.
Okay. Moving on, Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations Communications, Mrs. Nachman.
Hello. First, I'd like to thank Terry for her work.
We appreciate that you changed the date here.
And the only thing I would like to add tonight is that I believe most people in this room know that we recently lost a very beloved staff member. Melanie Nakanowitz lost her fight to cancer on the evening of November 21st, and her memorial was this past weekend. Melanie was a longtime teacher in the district, special education teacher, serving both Keeler Elementary, so way back before the day treatment time, and a long time at Hilbert Middle School, and ended her career at the high school, where Mike and I stole her to come to the high school. But Melanie was a delight. She had so many friends in the district. Unfortunately, I was sick on Saturday and could not attend her memorial, but I am told that the house was packed with not only current staff, but many, many former staff going way back. So she fought this battle for a year and a half, and if we can just keep her husband, Chris, and their 2 kids in our thoughts during the holidays. I'm sure this is not easy on anyone, but I also know that she was in a lot of pain and suffering, so hopefully that can bring some peace. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Executive Director of Curriculum and Technology Communications, Mrs. Crenshaw.
Good evening. Thank you, Terry, for all that you do. You are like a rock that holds us together. I just want to make sure the glue, you're the one. Everyone goes to Terry for everything they need, even a date change. So she is a pillar here. Anywho, so I had big plans to come and do a big data presentation for you tonight, but December is grant month, and all the grants are due, and since Miss Kathy retired last year and left me with that fantastic job that I love with all of my heart, the last couple weeks have been a little busy. So we will bring you a presentation on our data next month, and all of our building administrators will work with us on that. We've been doing a lot of data dives, so I think we will have a lot of good information to share. Well, maybe not all of it good, but a lot of it will be good, I hope. So, yes, that's my update for this evening.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Osowski, seconded by Ms. Miller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Just taking our time. All right. We will move on to action items. Action item A, special consideration, non-consent agenda action items. Item 1, 2023-2024 financial audit. Can I get a motion that the Board of Education, at the recommendation of Michael Beltink, Chief Financial Officer, and Jason Witt, Superintendent, approve the 2023-2024 financial audit as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Osowski, seconded by Ms. Miller. Is there any discussion? Any questions that came up? All right, recalls a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Dean?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Osowski?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion carries. Now you can go. Now we will let Dan free. Well, there you go. You just love us, right? All right. Number 2, annual summer tax resolution 2025. Can I get a motion that the Board of Education, at the recommendation of Michael Beltink, Chief Financial Officer, approve the annual summer tax resolution for 2025?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Osowski, seconded by Mrs. Martin. Is there any discussion? Thank you, Terry.
To the chair.
Mr. Osowski.
Since Terry's just changing dates, I think she can help Kim with the grants.
I agree. That's in church, we call that voluntold in church. You just got voluntold. All right, is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Dean?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Osowski?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion carries. Okay, here's the hard one. You guys always make this so hard for us. All right, can I get a motion for an appointee? Do we have someone willing to say who they're looking for, who they
Sure.
think? Mr. Bailey?
I move that Ms. Johnson be nominated for the position.
Okay. So we have a motion to nominate Megan Johnson. Is there support? Support. Seconded by Mrs. Martin. I don't think she needs to accept. All right. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. I need a roll call vote relative to Megan Johnson appointment as trustee to the Redford Union Board of Education. Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Dean?
Yes.
Mrs. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Osowski?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Congratulations. Motion carries. Before we go forward, I will again say thank you to both of you. It takes a lot of courage to step out and come in front of people that you don't know and have us, ask you questions. And
You've got a good spirit.
and just thank you for your commitment to our kids. And I hope to see you involved. Believe me, we can find things for you to do. And hang tight because we will swear you in after the meeting. That's the other job Terry does so well for us.
She does two things. She
She's
changes
very important.
dates, and she swears people
She swears
in.
people in. I told her this will be my 4th time, and I just said I promise. Okay. Can I get a motion that the Board of Education, at the recommendation of Jason Witt, Superintendent, and Mike Beltink, Chief Financial Officer, that the Board of Education hereby resolves to approve the submission of the application for preliminary qualification of bonds to the Michigan Department of Treasury as presented for a May 6, 2025 election, and further resolves as follows to apply for preliminary qualification of bonds by the state treasurer for the purpose of financing the school construction description in this application, present said application to the state treasurer for action prior to the official action of the Board of Education calling the election on said bond issue, present a final qualification application to the state treasurer for qualification of their bonds after this bond issue has been approved by the electors of the Redford Union School District Number 1. Acknowledge the reading of this application and approval of all statements and representations contained herein as true to the best knowledge and belief of the Board of Education, and authorize the Secretary of the Board of Education to sign the preliminary application and submit same to the state treasurer for review and approval. I will remind this board that we have to have a motion and a second before we can have discussion.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Osowski, seconded by Ms. Miller. Okay. There's quite a bit, you might want to come up, because we have quite a bit, I personally have quite a few questions and discussion. So much so that the answers may change the decision. So I guess I'll go first, because I have documents in front of me. So I have in front of me two sets of list, one that was presented to us in October, and one that was sent in our board packet on Friday. There are quite a few differences in them. So my first question is, have we gone to Treasury yet?
Yes.
Do we have, okay.
For preliminary review.
For preliminary. What happens if we, A, table this till next week and call a special meeting, or B, don't approve this because we have concerns?
So I'd have to look at the exact dates from legal counsel that were provided to see what the cutoffs were. I believe this was the last scheduled board meeting prior
It
to the
is. I would have
cutoff
to call-
for the deadline.
Yeah.
As far as calling a special meeting next week, sorry, I don't have the dates to see what that cutoff was to confirm when that would be.
Okay. And let me say that I take the thought of calling a special meeting in December with a lot, I take that into account. It's December. The last thing we want to do is be here. So then let's see if we can get our questions answered tonight then. And I'll just start, and you probably don't have this, but I'm going to just start with some questions that I have. And we'll start with Beach Elementary. So we have renovate cafeteria interiors, flooring, ceilings, walls, $559,440. We have $1 million fund balance in our food service fund. Is that not usable, Mr. Beltank, for this kind of stuff?
It is to a certain degree. So the cafeteria is used as a gymnasium. No, not in this case, is it? Not the beach. Okay, so it can be used for assemblies. They will never let you take 100% for tables or
Right.
that area space because it is used for other things. But we could assign a percentage,
Okay.
a reasonable percentage. So yes, there
Because,
could be.
we come up against this every year, and I don't see that fund balance going down. I see it going up. And
And there is a.
and I know there's rules.
There is a plan in place to get that spent down, even with, but that beach cafeteria is probably a ways out with people though too. So.
Okay. Okay, so I will move on to Hilbert. This is where I have my biggest issues. So let's talk about, in the October document, we had $310,000 for a scoreboard, and about $500,000 worth of upgrades to a field that we don't currently use, to stands that we don't currently use, to my knowledge, we don't have any plan to use. And then in this document, I see that the line item under site that was the scoreboard for $310,800 is now called replace athletic track surface chute lanes. My comment to that is $300,000 to repair a track that we have had issues with all along. And yet we were assured by experts that that track was fine. That, and we were disrespected. This board, the members of this board who questioned that over and over and over again, not by you, by your predecessor, we were disrespected over our concerns. We were this close to demanding that track be ripped up and redone, and we didn't do it. We withheld payment until we were assured that it was good, and now we're looking at $300,000 worth of repairs to a track that is 4 years old.
Okay, I can speak to that. First of all, it's not repair. The track is in fine condition.
So why does it say that? Replace, I'm sorry, it's replace.
First of all, these are placeholders, and that particular project came up, and through the bond process, we actually talked about putting a structural coating that had a different color than black on the exchange lanes, part aesthetic, but also part structural, for the long-term life of the track. And so it was brought up following the meeting. One of the board members had a conversation with Mr. Wills about some of those things that were allocated in Hilbert. Mr. Wills and I, subsequent to that conversation, took those board members' comments into account, and we looked at projects that we had initially discussed. We talked about originally when that track was put in, putting in the exchange lanes that would be like royal blue in color and add some aesthetics, but also add some longer-term structural benefits as well to the track. Not that are absolutely needed right now, but within a few years, we thought it would improve the condition of the track overall. And when there were talk about, when the board member had questioned the scoreboard, the money allocated for a scoreboard, the money allocated for some lights on the site, and those things, we looked at an opportunity to reallocate some of those funds within the application, because while there are lights that need to be repaired on that site, the lights do not need to be replaced like they were with brand-new lights out here at this stadium. The other thing is, our track team still does compete on that site.
I agree.
So, our track team competes on that site, the community uses that site, so there is a need still for lighting improvements. There are scoreboards that are less elaborate than the scoreboard that we have on the field right across the street, and that other scoreboard is in such disrepair that it doesn't even show accurate numbers. There are potential community uses for that grass field, as well as scoreboards that are less expensive that could accommodate track, since our track athletes both at the junior high and high school level compete out there. Likewise, the condition of the grandstands is such that they need to be replaced at some point in time. And when I say that, I don't mean replaced with an exact set of grandstands that accommodates as many fans or necessarily as a press box or anything else, but the grandstands in that area should be replaced within what would be the lifespan of this bond project. So again, those changes that were made from what was initially discussed at the board workshop to what you're seeing now were a culmination of reallocating some funds that were planned for the Hilbert site based on the site assessment that was done initially. And then a discussion about how we might reallocate some of those same funds within the site as placeholders to make improvements on that site. So this is not about the condition of the track. It's those reasons that I've indicated.
Okay. I will go down further to, and you may have sort of answered this question. under furniture and equipment, says other, replace selective kitchen equipment, classroom furniture, and stadium scoreboard. Again, I speak to a scoreboard that was up here. I feel like it's been buried down here in this other equipment, and $1 million fund balance in our food service fund to replace kitchen equipment. I am all in favor of classroom furniture, new equipment. I feel like we moved the scoreboard, stuck it down here in something in a hope that we wouldn't notice it. That's
Well, I
just
can
the way
tell
I
you
feel.
that's the way you feel. I can tell you that that was the direction that was given to us as we went through the PQ application process with Treasury. That was a recommendation of Treasury that we do that. It wasn't meant to not be transparent. And I can assure you that just like I've pushed on the bond team throughout this project to use food service fund balance whenever possible, which we did throughout the project, you can ask anybody present on the bond team, we would continue to do that here. So to the extent there is a food service fund balance that can be utilized for some, to accommodate some of these projects, that would continue to be the case, as it was with this bond project.
My next question is, why would we put a line item in that has a $0 attached to it? Like, just help me understand the purpose of that. For example, replace or install bottle filling stations. It looks like we need 7 of them, but there's no like dollar.
That's because we have another source of funding
Okay.
for
I
the
like to know
replacement of
why.
the bottle fillers.
Okay, I like to
In
know.
fact, I think we just got $180,000 for that.
Yay!
Oh,
Terry!
108. See, Terry knew that too.
See, Terry knows a lot. Terry, I trust Terry.
I knew it was 100 something.
Okay, we'll move on to McGowan. In our original documentation, we had 4.84 million, and this one now has 5.1 million. I just want to know where the increases are, because I'm not seeing them. Keeler went from $6.1 million to $6.4 million. The majority of that increase is in contingency, permits, construction manager fees. That's a pretty big increase there, guys. Also, what happened, I see where we need to pave that gravel lot. I thought that that was temporary, and that central office being in that location was temporary. What happened to that decision? And then I'll let you, and then the last one is,
Well, temporary, I guess, is a relative term. And so, I mean, just speaking with regards to that, the stone lot has worked fine as a temporary solution. And I do think that there may be other uses for the north wing at Keeler, even if it's not used long-term for central office administration. And if that's the case, that lot would benefit from being paved. So that's where those, again, as we took the time to walk the sites through a combination of individuals, those were the type of improvements that came up as we walked through each individual site. Now, I can say this, I don't have a specific program right now to recommend for the north wing at Hilbert. If all of central office were to locate elsewhere, there's a chance that a portion of central office might relocate elsewhere and the remainder would stay in that building. There's also a chance that one of our community partners that we have may want to lease space from the district in that north wing at Keeler. So there are different opportunities there for us to explore that would still continue to utilize that space.
okay. And again, I'm just trying to understand the big picture here. Same building, we're talking about replacing 26 classroom doors and hardware. Weren't those doors replaced with this last bond work? Don't we have new doors in that building already?
No.
Keeler.
There are some doors that were replaced. There are also a number of exterior doors that weren't replaced as part of that bond. And the exterior doors are in significant disrepair. There were also interior doors that we weren't able to address. So for example, we replaced the classroom doors within that space. But we did not, there are a combination of exterior doors and interior doors that were not replaced as part of the bond.
I guess that's why I was confused, because it does say replace classroom doors. And I thought we had replaced classroom doors. And
Yes.
so I just want to make sure I'm not losing my mind. Okay, let's go to the old schoolhouse. There was no discussion in the original presentation. We got another $46,000 allocated to electrical wiring upgrades at the old schoolhouse. You know, I feel passionately about our responsibility as the stewards of that historical building, but we are well over $1 million into a building that we originally only wanted to spend about $500,000 on. Granted, the board approved this. I don't like seeing something come to me 2 days ago that was never discussed in this original. I understand we've discovered some more issues there. I'm just getting on record here. I feel like we were way in over what we ever intended to spend on that building. Same thing with transportation. Again, not discussed in October, another $46,000. Demolition of Beck and Stuckey, almost $600,000 that the board was never even asked how we felt about that. It was here. I personally feel like when I saw this, I had questions already. I get a document now that is different. I feel like the attitude was that we wouldn't take the time to take a close look. And shame on me, I probably wouldn't have if it hadn't been pointed out to me.
I can assure you that was not the case, but I understand your perspective. I would say this. Originally, there was more than $600,000 allocated within the current bond that was to be used for demolition of those two sites.
Yeah.
So when it was discussed that we still hadn't done that work yet, and this additional document was reviewed a little bit closer, that's where those funds ended up being allocated for the potential demolition of those buildings.
My concern with demolishing 2 more buildings is that we then create 2 more vacant properties in this township. And they're vacant, I mean, the buildings are vacant, so either way. And that makes us the landowner of 3 pieces of property that, while I know what should be done with them, and I'll revisit this conversation after this. And I also know the need to demolish them because of of a timeline that we have, that they can only stay vacant for a certain number of years. And before, if you want to put something back in them, then you got a whole nother mess of problems, right? I understand all of that. My concern is we're going to tear down 2 more buildings, creating 2 more empty lots, that while we have an idea and a plan of what we would like to do with them, we know from experience that our community is going to give us a hard time about. Even though it's the right thing to do, given the fact that we have a housing crunch in this country. We have a housing shortage in this country. We have a housing shortage in this metro area. And more houses mean more property taxes, which is better for the district. But, God forbid we build houses on green spaces. Oh, sorry, that was just a little.
Well, the bottom line is, with regards to those 2 spaces, is we have a certain period of time within which we have to decide to either do something with the buildings, or someone else could help us with those decisions.
So here's my dilemma. As a board member, as a taxpayer, and as a leader, I know that the right thing to do is to approve this because our buildings need this work. We need the upgrades to HVAC. We need the upgrades to electrical. We need the upgrades to plumbing. Our students deserve that. We haven't been able to do that. My concerns are, is our plan? We have no, this board hasn't, we're going to spend all this money. Do we have a plan to maintain them so that 15 years from now, 20 years from now, we're not, the people who come behind us aren't saying, oh my God, what did those idiots do? They didn't maintain anything, which is what happened with our current roofs. We spent all that money, and then there was no maintenance on them. We voided warranties. I understand that roofs have a lifespan. I get it. I have a house with a roof on it. I understand that the new roofs are more energy efficient, and that ultimately there's costs down the road. My concern is that we're going to approve $12 million for roofs, let's just say, with no communication to how we're going to maintain them. Which brings me to lighting, and this is more a question. I know we have to do, fluorescent lights are at the end of life cycle. We have to do, this is more, I'm gonna get on my soapbox, we have to go to LED lighting. I've sat on this board for a long time. When the government first mandated that you go to LED lighting, there was a lot of grant funding out there. My husband happens to be an employee of the Salvation Army. Well, not anymore because he's retired, but he was at the time. It was entirely paid for by grant funding. I said then that we needed to start to seek that money. Is that money still available? And if so, are we going to be seeking that? Because that's a lot of money to have to upgrade these. We know that the fixtures, ballasts don't exist anymore, and I get that the work has to be done. I just ask that we be good stewards of that money and find out if there is still federal government assistance around that. I just don't know. It's like I'm just torn because I know what the right thing to do is, but I really felt blindsided by some of these changes, and I really don't like to feel that. And when my board members call me and say they feel blindsided by these changes, how do I as a leader say just trust the process, right? When my trust is a little shaken. That's just my heart and my concern. Mrs. Martin.
Also, as we think about the tear down of Stuckey, I know it was some conversation about possibly even thinking about converting that school into a military school. And so, like, where's that discussion at? What's going on there?
Well, again, this is a step, this is a preliminary step. Just like there was money to knock down those buildings in the scope of the first bond project, those buildings are still up. So this is not a final decision about the disposition of any property.
I'm sorry, but then why put it in the budget?
What?
But then why put it in the budget?
So we have to tell the treasurer.
Because if it's not in there and we want to do that, we can't do that. So you have to cover all your bases within this, but I will tell you this, where are those things? I'll just be, I guess, and maybe this isn't the best way to do this, but this is the only way I know how. So I'll be blunt. All those things are things that we can discuss and have discussions on, so we can talk about reallocating and repurposing one of these buildings. We can talk about selling the property at Bowman. We can talk about a whole lot of things. First of all, there's 50 million initiatives going on within this district already. All necessary, or I wouldn't be advocating for them. At the same time, there are things and initiatives that I can push forward, and there are also some things that, quite honestly, this Board of Education has to be the ones to decide if they want to move forward with or not. This is one of those things. The bottom line is, we don't have any other funding source to tackle these projects. The $2 million fund balance isn't going to do it.
Great.
So this is our opportunity with the May election to pursue and try to sell to the voters of this community to support us again. Hopefully they recognize the good stewards we were with this first project and would support it. But I understand there's people have questions and people have things, but there's a whole lot of things that go into deciding if we're going to run a special program. And I can tell you from my experience, and I'm not knocking it because these are tough decisions to make. But we talk about doing something that potentially makes sense for kids, but if we get 2 or 3 people here from the community who are upset about it, we fail to act at times. So I can't answer that question about where are we at with doing, potentially putting in a discipline academy. Because I can tell you there's going to be people who line up out the door and say, not in my backyard will you offer that program. Even if it's what kids within our district or within Wayne County need and would benefit from having. So, I mean, we can delay this, we can push this off, we can engage in discussions, but we already have a ton of things going on in this district, and the things, quite honestly, that we're moving forward are the things that, quite honestly, don't involve a lot of potential for pushback. But some of these other things that I have in my mind, some of the initiatives that I've introduced to the board at different times and in different ways, honestly would take the will of the board to potentially stand in a face of opposition and make some tough decisions on. So, I mean, I can't answer where are we at with this. I can tell you this. The fact that you might approve this application for preliminary qualification of bonds is not compelling us in the moment to tear down Stuckey or to tear down Beck. And it doesn't preclude us from having further discussions about the potential use of either property. But the bottom line is, we've identified different building needs. We could have walked through Beck, we could have walked through Stuckey and assessed all the things that would have to be done to those spaces right now if we were going to keep either or both of those facilities. But understanding that currently we don't have a plan for the use of those buildings, it didn't make sense to do that assessment and then to throw all those dollars into this bond application. Instead, like we did with the first bond, we want to invest these dollars, and what we're proposing through this application is to put the dollars in the buildings that we know we need and we know we're using for the foreseeable future.
I got a question. As it relates to Hilbert classroom doors, were they redone?
Yes. I believe the classroom doors were done.
The classroom, but I think there's offices and other various rooms and stuff in there that still have the old doors to be replaced.
Because I just remember a teacher was talking to me about some doors at Hilbert, and so that's why I asked if they were done. And they have been, so all the classroom doors.
What? Yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay. Well, I know that the only way we get these things done is through this bond. That's where my head and my heart, argue. I also know that there have been times when our community has been upset with us. I will say this for the record, that the reason the Bowman lot is not developed is not because the community complained about it. It's not at all. It's because the board, the committee that listened to the proposals didn't like any of them. And when we asked for counter proposals, nobody was interested in counter proposal, giving us counter proposals. And so it kind of died. I think the market has changed, and I think at a future date, we do need to look at that property again. And I, for one, have always been prepared to stand in the face of opposition, especially when it comes to increasing revenue for this district in the form of appropriate numbers of houses and appropriate styles and sizes of houses and the appropriate disposition of properties that no longer serve this district. We are a different board than we were, when those first proposals came to us. And I think the time is most definitely, we need to start to relook at that, but that's for another day. Is there further questions or concerns, Mr. Osowski?
To the chair. Yeah, I have a couple questions. One, are these placeholders? Or are these what we're going to do?
These are placeholders based on the needs within the identifying
But we can change, and none of this is finalized.
No, it's not.
So it's stuff that we're going to go through and have a chance to voice opinions.
But it is covering our bases for the needs within each building space.
But things can change.
Yes.
Okay. Second follow-up on that is, any update on the baseball field?
That's something we need to get back to. I've been working with, the first step to get to that answer is we're going through a process now to close out the final projects. And until we close out those final projects, I won't feel comfortable. I'm not going to be in a position where I can bring forward the information that you would need to have to make an appropriate assessment for which approach to use on the baseball field. So essentially this, I'm trying to work now through our CFO, through our owner's rep, and through the accountant that works with our owner's rep to identify the amount of available funds that we have so we can make as an informed decision as possible about those three different options that were previously presented to the board. And as much as I've been pushing on different entities to close out those projects, the bottom line is those projects aren't closed out yet. And it's not just our friend Rob here. In fact, Rob has very little control. He's more a mechanism to push back on why that's not done. And so we are making our way through that process. But until we have those numbers, I'm not in a position where I feel comfortable bringing something forward, because I understand the question's going to be, if you like option B that cost $1.2 million, you're going to ask me if we have $1.2 million. And I can't tell you if we have $1.2 million or if we have 500,000 or what we have to allocate for that project.
I'm just worried about Title IX, because the girls have a new field. And I know we had the dugouts, that we had a certain amount of time before we had to get dugouts for the girls. And I don't want any pushback from that. The other thing is, if we allocated it, like you said, with the buildings being demolished in the first phase, and you carried it over to this one, the baseball diamonds were part of the first phase, and I've not seen it carried over to the second phase.
I believe we're going to have enough funding. Okay, so here's where we're at. I believe we're going to have funding, but these are the numbers I'm trying to confirm. But I believe we're going to be able to move forward with a baseball field project based on not necessarily the initial bond funds allotted, but the additional funds from the general fund that were allocated towards completion of the full scope of the projects.
I just don't want it to fall by the wayside.
So yes, that's why the baseball field isn't in there, because I believe we are going to have the funds to
From this series.
develop a new baseball field, but it's basically gonna be a reinvestment of some of the general fund dollars that we allocated to finish off these projects. I just don't have that final number yet.
Okay.
And let's say that final number is $3 million, let's say. I know Mike is gonna wanna recapture up as much of that $3 million as he can, but I also know we wanna have a nice baseball diamond.
Right. I just don't want, like I said, to fall through the wayside. The other question is, when we get further involved, are there gonna be any changes from the first set to the second set? Plant Moran, Chrisman, Spalding, D.
Like,
Decker?
will we bid out?
We would go through we would go through a process again. That would be my recommendation.
Not that we don't love you guys, but, you know.
That my recommendation would be that we go through a process again. I can tell you this, we appreciate our partnership with Plant Moran, and I can tell you that I wouldn't have made it through this project without the assistance of an owner's rep. I can tell you that we had some hiccups through the process that I continued to work through, and I think we ended up in a much better spot working through those things with having Rob's support. And but I've also had discussions with Plant Moran about them continuing on potentially as the owner's rep. At the same time, we also, I loved our construction team, but there were some others within the process that I think we should go do our due diligence if we move forward with this to consider a potential different combination of things, but we would go through a process for that. We haven't locked in the construction team, the architect, any of those things.
Thank you, that's all I wanted to make sure, we weren't locked in.
And there's various ways you can go about gathering that team too, so you just have to talk.
It is a
through which approach you wanted.
service, so you can do things a little different, but we would engage in a process for that.
Do we have an anticipated time frame that we're going to know those wrap-up numbers? And do we have a deadline? Like a mandated deadline that we have to have wrapped up this current bond's work? And when can this board expect to see and hear some of those numbers?
Our hope is really to have it wrapped up in the next 2 months.
Okay.
I mean, our goal was the end of the year. We're getting.
So I can respond to that by saying, we're closing out projects all the
Your
time,
magic 8 ball.
every week. And I can tell you, I will ask no later, if it's not possible in January, but it probably would be at the January workshop, that either at the January workshop or no later than February, I will have the team come in and give us an update. And I believe by that period of time, we'll be closed out.
Yeah, we are meeting every week, consistently for probably the last 8 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that, just to review costs and work on getting things closed out. So we are getting close, and
I will say, Rob, since you come in, I feel like you handle our criticisms better than some others have. And sometimes our anger and wrath. So I appreciate that you don't, that you give us, that you do your best to give us answers. And you're not responsible for things that happened prior to, like the nightmare that was the track. But I appreciate that you have been, as a valued member of the team, and that when I yell at you, you don't yell back at me.
well, I apologize, I didn't have more answers. I took notes from the questions you guys asked, but I wasn't directly involved with all the details with that, and
Yeah.
I know Mr. Wills was at the last meeting presenting that, so, some of these I'll have to go back to him.
Yeah, Mr. Wills was going to be here this evening, but Mr. Wills had a meeting that he was supposed to have last week that unfortunately was rescheduled for this evening, so. I've already let him know that he should have been here.
It's like, man, Evelyn's yelling again.
No, and I want to be clear, those are fair questions, but a portion of the reallocation of those did come out of a conversation that happened between Mr. Wills and Mr. Osowski, actually. And then a follow-up with me about how we might reallocate those funds, because quite honestly, Mr. Osowski brought up some very good points within the nature of that discussion.
All right, Mr. Bailey?
So who's on the bond team?
The bond team has not been determined yet.
Who worked on that?
Oh, this bond team? The bond team for this? So for the application of preliminary qualification of bonds, this assessment was done in conjunction with Paul Wills, Miles Thomasitis, Mr. Beltink, myself, and Mrs. Crenshaw, just with regards to assessing the needs of our facilities. And again, a lot of this was an overlap with the larger school infrastructure study that Plant Moran was leading as a representative for all school districts around the state. So this was an overflow of a project that was already underway at the state level.
So you had mentioned a comment about pushback from the community. So this bond team that we have had no public representation? Or even board?
The team that developed this application did not include a board member, did not include a member of the public. However,